Hi, thank you. Thanks everyone for being here, and KDocs for putting this on. May I start with the filmmaker? Thank you so much for this powerful, courageous film and the witness of such power and courage. I would love to hear how this came about for you and this process to end up in such a remarkable place to witness and be alongside, not just through the making of this film, but even currently now, as we saw at the end of the film, so much going on. So thank you for what you did and for the continued impact.
Thank you. You know, it's really interesting because I get thanked all the time, and I always feel like it's really not me that should be thanked. You know, it's the family that should be thanked, right? It's the extraordinary courage and resilience that they displayed, and I mean, what a journey they took, right? And really against all odds. I feel actually just really fortunate that they trusted us and allowed us to, you know, to tell their story. And the way I found them and the way we got into this was I was actually I had decided that I was going to make a film looking at masculinity in India, and I started to follow the work of the organization that's featured in the film. And they were running a gender sensitization program in the state of Jharkhand in 30 villages with men and boys. And they were actually going to be working with these men and boys for 3.5 years, essentially trying to teach them a different way of being male. And Ranjit, the father, was somebody that was enrolled in this gender sensitization program. So that's how I came across his story, and that's how I started to kind of track his journey and the journey of his family.
Thank you, Nisha. Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I'm going to second that. Thank you for making this, even though everyone has already said that to you. But I do have a question for you as a filmmaker. You had so it was clear that you were present behind the camera and that you were almost another character, obviously, because a lot of the people in the village were very aware that you were there.
Yeah.
But you also got such beautiful, intimate moments with that family and captured their relationship in, I mean, even that last scene with them at the carnival. It's like, I mean, it's stunningly shot. It's beautiful relationship dynamics. I mean, it's so beautiful. So I guess my question is, how did you build that relationship and have them be so comfortable in front of the camera like that were you so close to them all the time filming them, or how did that work for you? I'd love to hear about it.
Yeah. Well, it took time. And, you know, I filmed with the family for, I guess, about 2 years, 18 months to 2 years. You know, initially I was really awkward around them. I think I was really shy around them and uncomfortable. And in part, it was because I sensed that they were uncomfortable around me. And in part, I was uncomfortable because of how sensitive the story was and feeling, I guess, trapped, you know, between two ideas of like whether I should do this, whether I should not do it, just given the sensitivity of the material. So I was always a bit awkward. And but eventually we just kind of got to know each other and became really close. And you know, I work with an Indian crew. I work with an Indian team, and it's usually the same people. So you know, my husband, who's the cinematographer, and Anita Kushwaha, a good friend of ours, who's a sound recordist. And, you know, we've over the years have been working together a lot. So we've built up this pretty great relationship. And we just kind of are, I think, together are able to make people feel very at ease. So I think eventually they felt extremely comfortable, and that's how we became so close to them. And they allowed us to really, they just really revealed themselves. I think one of the things that I've heard a lot from people is that they don't feel like they're watching a film. They feel like they're experiencing a journey, and they're going on the journey, you know, with the people in the film. And I think that's a testament to the intimacy.
Thank you. Thank you. The individual in the front and then the individual in the back.
Hi, I am Sandeep, and I am from. So my maternal side is from Ranchi. So this story I was not aware that's from Ranchi, so it was very close to me. Overall, thanks for bringing the story to the global audience, and I'm very privileged to be able to watch this setting here. My question was related to the police thing. I was really glad that ultimately the verdict went on the girl's side, but the investigation that happened from the police was not like very well done. So now that the story has come up to the and is going to Oscars, I mean, is there anything that's happening on the police reform side using this story as a medium to make some changes, or are you in touch with any other organizations who are doing something about it?
Well, we're doing a big impact campaign with the film, where we will actually use it in advocacy work, you know, to try to make social change. And one of the things that we want to do is we actually want to show the film to police forces in India. And it's really to sensitize, you know, all the systems that survivors have to navigate in order to get justice, including, you know, obviously police and first responders and, you know, lawyers and judges. So that's definitely part of our plan and part of what we're going to do. And not just in India, it'll be something that we do all over the world.
Yes.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you for making the film. I suppose I have a technical question. I was really stunned by what a cinematic film this was. It really, to me, had the energy of just a narrative film, and particularly in the way that it was edited together. There were so many shots of crowd reactions, and I guess I was just wondering, one, how many cameras were used at the time of filming, and obviously staged is the wrong word, but were there any moments that you had to recreate so that you could capture them for the cameras?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it is a really cinematic film for sure, and that's because the DPs that I worked with are really incredible. There were a number of DPs, but you know, the key one that I worked with was my husband, and they're all brilliant. They're all amazing. You know, India has a number of incredible cinematographers. So it's very very beautiful. I know it's a beautiful film to look at. We always had one camera, so we only used one camera, and then sometimes we had those drone shots. My editor is brilliant. Both of my editors, I had two editors on the film, and they're brilliant. So I think that is partly why it feels like you're watching sometimes like a drama. I think there's a few reasons why it feels like that, why it feels so cinematic and dramatic. A, because the story inherently is very dramatic. B, Ranjit has a face that says everything, that speaks volume. He has a face that is so, somebody said the other day, it felt like a painting, like, you know, every frame felt like a painting. Like his face was just, it was full of expression, and it just, he really allowed you into his world. He didn't have to say very much. It was just his face that spoke volumes. So I think that, coupled with my editor, you know, just knowing when to cut away and what to cut away to, like just really being able to capture kind of the emotional intensity of Ranjit's journey. I think that really helps. So it does sometimes feel like you're watching a drama.
Thank you very much. Yes.
Hi there. I reiterate everything that everyone has said about this film. It was so wonderful to watch, and very, very important. I was left curious about the gem of a father and how it was within, you know, the context that was described by the speaker that opened the film. I'm left wondering more about him, his lived experience, and how it was that he arrived at such an incredibly progressive, supportive insight that helped him support his daughter. And it seemed as though a through that in the film was this activism around how do we adjust attitudes so that we can live in safer, more supportive communities for all genders and beings. And I was just curious of whether or not you happen to know if his activism has continued in larger reach, if he ever spoke about, or if he would be comfortable with you remarking about how it was that he was so passionate and committed to taking a stand and a voice that other people, perhaps in his position, would not have felt influenced or I think you're probably picking up on what I'm trying to say. Yeah. At 9 p.m. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I get it. So where does it come from? And what is he like now? And so it's so interesting. A couple of months ago, he and I were having a long conversation about, you know, his future, because setting up the family in terms of their future is something that's really important for me. So we were having this long discussion about, you know, what would he like to do and what makes sense. And one of the things that he said was, I would like to work with an NGO, which I thought was so great. So, I mean, hopefully we can create those kinds of opportunities, you know, for him at some point. It's definitely an intention. So his activism, I think he going through this experience and understanding how important it is, like what he's done, how significant it is. I think it's something that he wants to share. You know, he likes speaking, he likes communicating, and he's very eloquent. So I think this is something that he would definitely like to share. Where it comes from, it's an interesting thing. So one of the things that I didn't put into the film is that he actually was raised, when he was a child, his father abandoned the family, and he was raised by a single mom, and that shaped him for sure. But I also think that Ranjit is the kind of person who has kind of an inherent strength and goodness and morality, and he really looks at, and he wouldn't describe it this way. You know, this is the kind of language, you know, that we ascribe because we're growing up in the West and we have a certain level of education, formal education. But I think what he has is he has a very deep and principled understanding of human rights and the value of human rights and the need for equality and justice. And I think that just guides him. So I think that's where it comes from for him.
Thank you very much. Yes, right in the center of the room.
Thank you. The film is such an incredible journey, and it comes to an end, a conclusion with an outcome. And it also feels like an incredible beginning. And I wonder if you and others on the panel could talk more about the film as a beginning. What happens from here, both in the local level, as the film has global recognition and connects to other struggles. How, what would you like to see happen in the next, I was trying to think of a time frame, 10, 20 years, and then I thought, I don't know, how should the world, how does the world need to change? Can it change? In the time these young men are in prison, and that's not the end of the work at all. The tiger is kind of roaming. It's in this rigid society, and so I'm just curious about the film as the beginning of something. What is that something? What would you like to see? How do you imagine the future? Thank you.
It would be wonderful to hear from other people. I'd love to hear what you guys think.
Sure. I could start with me because I've been working on this issue for so long. A lot of the things that are highlighted is what we've been working on for at least 12 years, if not more, trying to get the courts changed. We've got judges who are getting mandated training, police are getting mandated training. Everybody's learning about trauma-informed interviewing. But what I'd like to see to actually change it, which we're starting to do with our organization, is get all the men on board and start the men's campaign. They've done it successfully in Australia, where they run the White Ribbon campaign, and they do it in Ontario, but it's never come to BC. So one of the things we're trying to do right now, we haven't got it going yet, is we're getting a committee of men together who are going to take that on. I think we've missed the boat on not involving everybody. Like when I look back to even my activism back in university days, always aimed at women and how can we protect ourselves and, how do we get help? And we still focus on that quite a bit, but we don't focus on the other half of the equation. Like why do men abuse? What's going on in our society that makes it okay? And so to me, this is a great springboard for moving some of those challenges of changing society forward.
I think when you take the film and you think of what the family intended to do, what the director Nisha is meant to do with this film, I think even if it just impacts, I always think even if it impacts one family for coming forward and it helps them to stand up with courage, I think on a grassroots kind of level. So I think that this, even if you make a small movement, it is some movement, and I think movement is really slow. I'm been working in this field for about 20-ish years and watching and activists as an activist. And helping people move past some of these issues and families. It is slow. It's a slow progression, but I think every time someone stands up, it gives them that much more support. There is so much more work to do, just as Balbir was saying, that if you get more people involved, more men, if you look at more societies, more religious groups, everyone involved, I think it would take some time. But there's progress, but it's slow, and I think it'll be continuous. And I don't think you can put a time on it, unfortunately. I think if I could make a wish, it would be done tomorrow. But I've seen in the last 20 years a lot of movement. For someone else, they might think, oh, that's not much movement at all. But it is. Every time a man stands up, a father stands up, every time a victim stands up and says that this has happened to me as well, and I want to do something about it, I think that is movement. So
I'm not sure. Oh, it is on. Great question. Love this as a jumping off point in the beginning, and just to use Kieran's, just want to honor her with the incredible quotes that you were able to capture. So she said to us, those who step in unison will never fail. And her father also told us that he did this out of love, and that he had felt helpless and powerless in his life, and that at this time he wanted to stop feeling that way, and he used love as a channel to move the dial for his kiddo. And so when I think about the jump off point, I think that those are the real truths that we have to contend with. How, as a society, will we show up in love to see people's full humanity and to be in unison to actually start to change the tides that are happening right now? And we kind of see the opposite of that happening. We see a lot of divisiveness. We see a lot of people not honoring other people's humanity. And I think that that is also one of the first places where we have to start. And we can talk about toxic masculinity. We can talk about toxic femininity. Also, those conversations leave trans folks and non-binary folks out of the conversation. And we know that, trans folks are experiencing sexual violence at higher rates even than cisgendered people. So we've got issues across the spectrum that we're going to have to look at, and to look at ourselves pretty closely about how we have each other's backs. Because if we're not walking together in unison, we're not going to make the changes that we need, for sure.
Thank you. And Nisha, did you want to comment?
I just want to thank you for saying what you said, everyone. I mean, it's so moving and it's so powerful, You using Kieran's words about standing in unison and talking about masculinity and the importance of engaging men, and then also just the idea that change is really slow, right? But that it happens and it's inevitable. I'm constantly in awe of how people react to the story, and I feel always so much gratitude to Ranjit and his family, and I wish so badly that they could experience, that they could sort of witness what their story is meaning for people around the world. I wish they could understand this conversation and they could see what they've inspired. I find it so moving. So thank you for that. And just on a very practical level, for me, the film is the film, but then the actual work that it can do is something else. And so, we are planning a big impact campaign with the film. And I would just love to talk to everyone on the panel about it at some point, because I think it would be wonderful to use it, as a way to kind of create change in society. But we're working with a global rights organization called Equality Now. And with them, we're going to be using the film to kind of advocate for policy and legal reform. And then we are also creating a campaign called Stand With Her, which is encouraging men to stand with the women in their lives. Those are all things that are in the work. So, for me, and of course, to encourage other survivors to come forward, which is happening. We get messages on social media all the time from other survivors in terms of having the courage to now open up, to also just feeling like they're healing as a result of seeing this story. So, yeah.
The individual with their hand up. Was there a second hand? Okay.
Should I wait? Oh, yeah. Okay. Sorry, second question, but it's for everyone. So we've heard a lot about men and getting them involved. I guess on a very personal level, because it all feels so big, right? To one individual, it feels so helpless in a lot of ways. So I guess my question is, anything that off the top of your head, I'm wondering, is there something we as mothers, as friends, as is there something that we can say to boys and men? Is there a way to make change on a very small level that you can think of that might not be obvious to us? That's it. I know that's a hard question.
It's a great question.
There is actually things that you could do. I think knowing the number and the stats of victims or how often this has touched someone, I think supporting a survivor is the very first thing that you could do. Letting them be in their space and just showing them their support is something that all of us can do as individuals in this room as we leave. On a bigger perspective, I always think of in terms of prevention and education. So if you can educate your children, educate those around you, whether that's in terms of resources or looking for the fact of how sometimes children are groomed, or how someone may pay attention more to someone, or something that sometimes we feel this doesn't feel right, but we decide to stay silent because it's not our business. So I think I'm not asking you to put yourself out in danger, but of course, if there is something that you can do, and if something does seem off to you, maybe tell someone else and get and then, so I think in those terms, I think those are the first things that we can do. But I think just a silent supporter, whether that's someone who needs you to stand up or help them, but I think that support and just helping eliminate some of the silence that surrounds sexual abuse, sexual assault, rape.
So yeah, I would echo supporting survivors in our lives, and I think there was some good examples of maybe what not to do in the film. But I wrote a couple of them down. So, a lot of the times we feel incredibly uncomfortable, and so saying things like "don't cry," "don't be afraid," "everything depends on you," "you must memorize your statement." These are all things that I have seen in my work as a victim service worker for many, many years, and they happen not from a place of a lack of love or desire to support folks. But I think really when we talk about people getting re-traumatized by having to go through this process, it's actually not from retelling our stories as survivors. It's actually about everything that surrounds that. And if we can just remember that at the heart of sexual violence is a loss of autonomy, then the rule that we can all live by is to just find ways to provide autonomy back to somebody who's had that breached. And that really means taking the lead from somebody that's experienced harm. And so that can sometimes also take the pressure off of us as people who are kind of in the mix or supporting folks. I have a 9-year-old boy, had a panic attack when I was pregnant and found out I was having a boy. And I think one of the things that we've really tried to do from the time he was born is just to really think about what consent and bodily autonomy looks like in our house. And that goes from everything from stopping tickling him when he says stop to listening to what his body needs. And I think the other piece is just around entitlement, right? That we aren't entitled to touch our friends, that we have to ask them first, that we don't comment on other people's bodies because that's theirs and we have ours. And I think those are the things that rape culture and patriarchy tell us to ignore and to move through. And so if we can gently kind of challenge ourselves and the kiddos in our lives, I think that's one great way that we can take some actions.
Sure, and I can add to that. So when you've got a child at home, boy or a girl, yes, you got to teach them all those things. Also, teach them about feelings and how do you express yourself. Create a trusting environment where the child does feel comfortable coming to you for anything. And that's one of the things we saw in the film from Gedden, was that it was the love that she had for her father and back and forth, right? So there's that. There's also looking at the video games. A lot of them are normalizing abuse. Some of the TV shows, some of the music. Like, there's so much out there that just normalizes violence for us. And trying to teach, especially, I guess, boys, but girls too, because we've got abuse the other way as well, is what is a normal, healthy relationship? What does it look like? Because we have some youth toolkits where we try to do that with youth, but I think if you do it from a young age, it's much more helpful. Yeah, and in terms of what can you do generally to help people, we've got a toolkit sitting at our table. Just grab them on your way out, and it goes through what you can say, etc. So I think that's a good start, just to support people. But prevention, of course, is key.
Thank you. And we have a very patient individual waiting.
I hope I can't remember. I'm a little bit old. First of all, I would like to say that movie is absolutely amazing because there's hardly any talking. It's the visual, the photography, just, it's unbelievable. The only conversation is between the workers and him and his family and the occasional court. But it's really amazing when you look at how little dialogue is in there and how deep the impression is when you're watching it. You know, partly it's because of him, you know, his persona, but it's just amazing film, really amazing. One of the things I was thinking, I worked a lot with teenage gang kids, like in the old days when they came from Vietnam or Guatemala, and the culture of violence, because women are at the bottom, that it seems to get dumped on them. But one of the things I noticed here when I was growing up and my friends had kids was always like, oh, give so-and-so a kiss, give so-and-so a kiss, which is something that still happens. And that I have seen kids recoil, but they do it. And that's almost grooming without knowing it, that you're allowing people, and it's a kiss. It's not shake my hand or even give me a hug, but it's a kiss. But I also wanted to ask, I've worked with kids, with boys who've done some horrendous things. And when I've been able to form relationships and ask them how they got to that point, if you work with them, they can articulate. And from that, you can learn how to approach boys in general. So for instance, those 3 boys, young men, lived in that village. Can you imagine living in that village and doing that to someone that you're all family? So I'm wondering, in the work that you do, if you talk to and make relationships, and not in an accusatory way, but trying to understand why these kind of extreme things happen, because that would be a great learning point, I think. Just wondering.
A lot of it is social acceptance. So it's normalized in their families. Like when we look at statistics, they've been abused themselves.
But I mean, I
Yeah.
don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean
Okay.
specific cases where you've gone and talked to them in depth, and maybe something special comes out of it.
I'm trying to think of it.
No, I haven't. To be honest, I've worked with survivors, no, I haven't had those conversations. I think for me personally, that would be really tough for me. So
Right.
I wouldn't be able to do something like that. But I think you have a point, and I think it would be, helpful and an incredible conversation.
Yeah, it's just curious. And the one other thing I wanted to comment: there are a lot of cultures where women are property. They're not the same level, right? They're property. If you have a women child, you might not make them survive. Or I've heard of a terrible case in Pakistan where some boy was walking with some girl he shouldn't have, caste-wise, and so they took his sister, and the entire governing body of the town raped her publicly. She was eventually lifted out of there. But that's very different than what we experienced, but on a much deeper level. But I'm just curious how it got to be that way, that females are in that position in so many cultures, our culture, all over the place.
So historically, we were considered property even by legislation. It came from, if you go back to our hunting gathering days, that's how far it goes. Okay, so men were generally bigger. They did the hunting and gathering. They were seen in charge. They had the power. It's all about power. So whoever has the power ends up being the abuser, along with the acceptance that goes in society when you look at social norms. And the social norms are entrenched. They're systemic right now. They're in our processes.
And a lot of the women are part of it.
Oh, of course, because now if we bring in psych theory, what group you think has power, you start emulating them. Like even if we look at our CEOs that are female, they'll have very similar characteristics to the men. Yeah.
So I just wanted to comment as a sociologist. And so historically, thousands and thousands of years ago, we see that women had a higher status than what they might have in the majority of the world right now. And we know that because of archaeological records and burial sites, women being buried in the center of the community, and or matriarchs being buried in the center, and other individuals being buried on the outskirts of the community. So various sociology theories argue that when warfare was needed, when we shifted into a warring state of living, then males became more important in societies, and society became more violent. I couldn't hear what you had to share.
Pregnant a lot of the time.
They were, but if we looked at the history of birth control, we see that many societies around the world were able to maintain birth numbers through various means that didn't include, although it does include, infanticide. I mean, using contraceptives like beaver testicle tea. Just, not that I want that, but would you like to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think colonization, particularly on these lands, has had a big, significant impact in the ways that patriarchy was brought here. Many of our host nations talk to us about a time where matriarchs were the circle of the decision makers, and it's squarely because of the colonial powers that came here that brought different teachings and that chose who to provide power to through capitalist engagement, truly trading happened only with men because they were bringing patriarchy here. And I think that, right now, also as a sociologist, what we're seeing with comments about trans women should not be in women's bathrooms, and, states in the US passing bills to outlaw trans identities. We had a 16-year-old Two-Spirit non-binary person murdered in their high school bathroom. We know that we create the environments that are true for people's lived experience, right? And so, yeah, so there are certain things that are kind of nature and nurture, but there's also a really significant influence from our social surroundings and how people are influenced.
And I believe that, yes, the individual with their hand up, yes.
Thank you. What I find additionally striking in the sort of the juxtaposition and then the similarity right here in Canada, or so-called Canada, is, you're watching the film and it's a small village and people are cooking over open fire, and you're seeing such an extreme case and injustice. But right here in the last couple weeks in Canada, in mainstream, not on the fringes, in about as mainstream Canada as it gets, the hockey league, we have a woman who was gang raped, whose case has already been settled out of criminal court and now is being brought back, with men who have been, celebrated as heroes in sort of the most mainstream Canadian, quote unquote, way. And the journalist who's bringing that forward, Rick Westhead, who is such a stand for these types of issues, and just the courage that it would take in Canada to bring this forward. And even with that coming forward on mainstream networks, the hate and vitriol coming through on social media, through Twitter threads, is stunning. And when you see that comparison, no matter where in the world people will go, whether it's small village or just the village of perception that is confronting them, to be able to try and suppress that which is uncomfortable, but that which is harmful, and that it would shake up their paradigm to be able to even acknowledge it, to the point of how hard they will work to keep that just down. And it just, it's been hard to watch in Canada, but now seeing this, and then also realizing as people here that we do have some ability to voice certain things without our lives being in danger. And then also how similar it is. That's not a question, but it's just, this isn't something far, far, far away in cultures that are different than ours. This is as KD, mainstream Tim Hortons, which only exemplifies why we need to be protecting those on the further margins as well, and listening to the lived experiences and believing them. Anyway, I'm not sure if anyone else can speak to this, how we can continue to stand with her in Canada with these things, and also continue to encourage men to be the ones to stand, because it's clear that that's where it needs to happen. Thanks for the space to ramble.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've got abuse everywhere. It doesn't matter which country you're in, which organization you're in, it cuts across. So that's why I say it's a pandemic. In terms of how do we stand with her, we stand with all people, right? Like, that's my big thing. If you see something, say something. Don't just cover it up. And we have a tendency to say, oh, it's not my business. I even get told sometimes by my spouse when I'm trying to interfere with somebody hitting their kid on the street, Like, he'll pull me away and go, what do you care? Why are you intervening? Right? Like, that's the society. It's like, oh God, I think Wally Uppal wrote a report where they always used to just say, oh, what happens in the bedroom is their business, right? And you get the same thing from a lot of people. Well, it's not my business, so if they're arguing or whatever they're doing. But it is. As human beings, we need to stand up for each other. And so I think that's what we all need to do.
Can I just say, I think you're absolutely right. I think what I've been starting to question is how we do that and what that looks like. What is standing with someone look like? How do we do it? And not doing it from a place of anger. Although, anger is obviously the spark and it kind of spurs things. But when we're trying to actually do right by someone, it's what is our approach and how are we doing it, and almost it's as hard as it is. What I've realized for myself anyway is that it's as important to have compassion for the abuser as much as you do for the child or the wife or the being that is being abused, because the abuser is also suffering. They're also hurting, and so and it's very difficult, but I realize that that's actually something that's very important.
Sometimes the abuser is being abused themselves.
Yeah.
It's a cycle.
Yeah.
And we know it passes through genetics as well as environment.
Thank you.
I can shamelessly plug Salal. So if you're local and you want to join our volunteer program, you can go through our crisis line training and actually be on the crisis line for survivors. You can join our board. There are ways, I think, that we can show up in community with folks. We can all go to therapy and sort our own selves out so that we're the best partners that we can be, great family members, great community members. And yeah, I just think being involved and having these conversations, we saw so clearly that the whole ecosystem is impacted when somebody in our community is harmed. And, people will test those around us to see what accountability might look like. And we can always practice like radical honesty and truth with people when we hear things that feel like they're actually harmful. A lot of us stay silent in the face of that. And so starting to engage in more conversations, I think, is one really awesome way. The Moosehide campaign across Canada is an amazing opportunity to be part of ceremony and to take action for all genders. Next Gen Men locally does really awesome work with guys that want to start unraveling themselves from patriarchy. So I think there's lots of ways that we can, be involved.
Thank you very much. And I think this has been such a fantastic dialogue. Thank you, each of you. And thank you so much to each of the presenters and the filmmaker. Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience. And most of all, I will thank KDocs. Yes, Janice, you are incredible. Thank you.